call the April 10th, 2012 Planning Board to order. The first item on the agenda are the minutes from the March 27th, 2012 meeting. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the minutes for March 27th, 2012, with the corrections made.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, approval not required.
And none received, Mr. Chair.
All right, sir. There are none of those. The next item on the agenda is a discussion, a continuation of the draft of the first outline of the wind turbine bylaw. First bullet is a recap of prior discussion in light of town meeting. Is everyone here familiar with what occurred at town meeting in relation to the wind turbine, the current wind turbine issue? If not, I will briefly reiterate that for you and for our audience. The article number 26, article number 23, thank you, was to see if the town would vote to continue the suspended operation of wind turbine 1 and continue curtailment of suspended operation 2, except for periods required for further study, ordinary maintenance on either turbine, until November 12, 2012, which is when we plan to have our bylaw ready to present to town meeting, by the request of Barry Funfar, who is a citizen, and others. And that article passed. Article 27 was to see if the town will vote to support the Board of Selectmen's plan of action to mitigate adverse impacts and optimize the operation of the town-owned wind turbines to maximize local environmental and economic benefits, or to take any other action. That article, that was a request of Christina Raleigh, who was a citizen of Falmouth, and that article also passed. So there were questions about whether or not they were in conflict with each other if they both passed. So I don't know exactly what else we need to discuss. I entertain discussion on that, and Mr. Curry, do you have some comments on that?
Unless the board members just want to recap in their own minds, but it's really in relation to your prior discussions of some things we have in the package for you to discuss tonight.
Okay.
I think we're aware of.
So are there any comments about what occurred at town meeting?
I have one. I just
Jim.
wonder, in the context of the things we're dealing with, whether we even should comment on this or not. We're really focusing on the bylaw for future locations, and this present situation is really the selectmen's issue. And we as town meeting members, we may want to comment on it. But I think our focus is on the new bylaw, and I think we should stay on that and let the selectmen solve their problem.
Okay. Doug?
Well, I feel like we should be learning from that experience as we go and incorporate what we learn into our bylaw. I mean, if we want to just have a generic bylaw, we could adopt the thing that I think Barnstable adopted, the draft. Am I correct about that? I looked on Barnstable's.
Not Mashpee and Truro and Bourne. I'm not sure what Barnstable did something to Barnstable, but it's, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
You can learn from let's learn from everything we can.
Any other comments? All right, then the next.
Which gets me in, just with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, it really, in your package, you should have handouts. The first handout really is this fundamental questions handout for it. That's really for that bullet point that I was discussing.
Oh, okay.
To revisit, light of those further discussions, revisit these questions we had last week.
Okay.
I guess I did do a good job at really explaining what I thought that I needed the board to do and to hear. So I've taken an opportunity to at least form some questions for you. I think that are of a policy level. We're not in zone, we're in land use policy mode. Leave zoning mode, leave regulatory mode. Think land use policy mode, big picture type questions. And I'm being a little insistent on this because the mechanics that will come out of this discussion that you're about to have, hopefully, with regards to these fundamental land use policy questions, the staff can take care of. We'll get you all that information and we'll generate a bylaw consistent with your thinking, which is based on that second handout. You'll see that we've kind of filled in the blanks for you. But we don't want you to go here yet. We want you to stay here and have a frank discussion about those two very fundamental questions that are in front of you. That's what I need to hear from you. I think that's what the town needs to hear from you too. And the neighbors need to hear about where we're heading with regards to land use policy and these wind systems we're about to discuss. So I've taken the liberty and I'm forming those two questions at your discretion, Mr. Chairman, for the board members to consider.
Okay. So, the staff has developed the fundamental questions that are placed in front of us tonight. And for the benefit of the audience and the TV audience, I'm going to read them. The first bullet is, based on what we know today, from the literature we've read to past experiences we've learned, does any member of the planning board envision additional industrial size, 1 megawatts or greater, wind turbines anywhere in Falmouth? Now, it's a shame that we don't have everyone here tonight, but not everybody can be everywhere at once. So, that being the request of the staff for us to answer that question, I'll entertain discussion.
Well, it's really, I think, that's on my behalf. I think it's a question the board members should be discussing amongst themselves for their own benefits.
All right.
What do you think?
Pat?
Okay, I'll leap in here because there, as we know, are multiple different sizes of wind turbines. This particular one is focusing on 1 megawatt or larger. Those are large, industrial-sized turbines. From what I have read in much of the literature that has been made available to us, the problems that have been experienced mostly come from the 1 megawatt or larger with the effects that have been documented. The other thing that I have read is that you have to have a certain distance from these very large ones that mitigate the, I'm going to use the term nuisance rather than annoyance. Mitigate the nuisance that is experienced from these large turbines. And from what I know of the distance that is available from where they could potentially be located here in Falmouth to the nearest residential property, such a siting would not be possible with that kind of distance. So I would come down on the side of no more of these large industrial-sized turbines in Falmouth. I'm rather sorry that this information was not available when we were looking at them a number of years ago. But that's the only thing that this question right now is structured to get from us, the large industrially sized turbines of 1 megawatt or better. And I would say absolutely no more of them in Falmouth. we don't have the appropriate siting available.
Other comments? Yes, Doug?
And the other problem with the larger ones is the low frequency noise is more prevalent with the larger ones, and which is harder to define and understand and create setbacks and zoning for. And I saw that the default size for the model draft bylaw that the state has promoted is anything under 60 can be considered, and then over 60 is another set of rules.
Okay. So
60
you would say,
megawatt.
so you would vote no on this question?
Well, we haven't done the mapping or figured out what size areas are still available, so I think it's preemptive to say that, but off the top of my head, I would say no.
Actually, I'm gonna butt in here a little bit, because Brian and Marlene did put circles, I believe, about a year and a half or two ago.
Based on what you know now, the literature you've read, and from the past experiences you've learned from, go with that information. Don't worry about setbacks, don't worry about this stuff. Go with your mind.
I think we're having a hard time
It's not easy.
differentiating that. Okay.
It's not- This is
Yeah, Jim?
not easy.
I'm not sure, but my only question is, on our far northern extreme of the town, is there a space where they could fit? I don't know the answer to that question because I haven't studied the setbacks. I'm familiar with the plans in the streets. I really haven't done the measurement. And probably not, but this is like such a definitive answer that there might be,
Okay, let me help you a little bit more.
that's where I need help.
Let's say you have 100 of these things in town, 1 megawatt or more. Based on what you know now, based on the literature you've read and the past experiences of even current management issues, is this a land use you envision on the landscape?
If we could have 100 of them?
Well, whatever that number might be. Don't worry about where they may go. Just, is this something on the
I understand the point
landscape
now.
that you envision? Based
Yeah.
on what you know now.
Ken?
From reading this, and over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of research on these things. And one of the things, like we've all mentioned, that we needed to learn, when we thought we were gonna get lesser sized turbines 6 or whatever years ago, we may not have known what we know today. And this actually is probably the best thing that we can use today to say that I believe, with the setbacks that I've seen are required, that we do not need this anywhere in the town of Falmouth, any more of these 1 megawatt plus turbines, because our properties and land, wherever you are, even in the western part of or the northern part of the town, we have residences all around, and these things impact residences a big ways out. I mean, the ones that we have could be 3/4 of a mile or more. So we're talking a half a mile or greater. All these 1 megawatt turbines could impact people, or even more. So I would absolutely say that these industrial sized turbines have no other place in this town. This size, those huge things.
From based on what I've seen now, I'd have to agree, from everything I've seen and heard, with all the testimony, the hearings, the 2 townwide meetings that we've had, the town meetings that we've had, discussions. I've attended every single one and not missed a one. I think that the size of these things is really what the fundamental problem is.
Well, yeah.
One other comment is, it appears from what we saw, Bob Leary's not here, too bad he's not here, went to a couple of the things and saying that it doesn't appear that the technology is gonna let a 1 megawatt turbine or greater get any smaller. So that whole size thing, they're just looking to build bigger ones. The technology's not to make them smaller and more efficient, so, of that size, the 1 megawatt plus is what it appears, so.
The turbines that are operating now are in question. They are what, 1.65 megawatts?
Right.
Okay. So we're talking about a turbine that's somewhat less in size than the ones that are out there. If I wasn't convinced that whatever bylaw that we propose and is adopted can't be changed in the future, then I think I would consider voting differently. But any bylaw that we adopt can be changed by town meeting, and so if things happen in the future that would warrant something different than what we propose, it could be changed. So I think we need to remember that. For me to envision sizes smaller, as small as 1 megawatt, which would be smaller than the ones that are out there now, I would say that in some kind of a catastrophic national situation where energy became, other types of energy became so expensive that these would be maybe the only alternative that we would have, and then I obviously would say I can certainly envision them being placed in Falmouth for the benefit of everyone. Even if you have to take by eminent domain properties that would be affected, as long as adequate compensation was given to the property owners. I can't honestly say that I can't envision. I can't say that I could not envision a 1 megawatt turbine being placed in Falmouth. But it seems to me that the consensus of the board is that we would probably say no.
Doug? Are we, by this discussion, setting policy here? Because it's kind of sort of a surprise question to me, and I look forward to doing the math on the sizes and trying to extrapolate our current situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's a shame we haven't done that first.
I know it's hard, it's very difficult to do, but yeah, you're setting a little policy based on what you know now, based on your experiences, based on your knowledge, based on the literature you review. It's sort of an inductive process than deductive. But I think it's really important. Otherwise, you could wind up like the city of Charlestown, Rhode Island. You could work on something, a bylaw you believe, from the bottom up, bring it to their city council, and they voted the whole thing down. So it's important to set, like any bylaw, your purposes, your intent, your policy first. You could always change it later on the basis of new information. But what I know today, knowledge I have, what I've read, what I've experienced, you're setting policy. It's a little different. The planning board used to have the zoning bylaw tinkering committee attached to you. And I'm forcing you to think way up here at the policy level. And I guess that's my job.
Well, Doug?
Well, most of what I read so far that's state-sponsored literature and the town's reading list is very favorable to wind development. And then I got another whole stack of literature that a lot of it came from neighbors of the, abutters of our current facility. And then I've got another stack of independent stuff that I found on my own online. But none of it is really definitive. And then we go to these generic things that are produced also by the state. So there's no, if you ask me to just say from what I know, I'm winging it to say whether or not they should be here at the 1 megawatt especially.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's why you're a board. That's why you vote. It's okay. You don't have to, but again, we're trying to impress upon you, you don't have to be the experts. You have to be the policy board. We can hire experts, you have experts. I don't know, I'm not a mechanical engineer, but when I need a mechanical engineer, I call my son. And he charges me his government rate. So, that's what we got, that's what you do. Be a policy board, based on what you know, citizen volunteers sitting here. It's not like we're gonna come down from our etched in stone. What we know today, where we are right now, today, April 2012, this is the approach we're taking. And that gives us our guidance, and then you can report to town meeting hopefully in November as to your thinking. Also leads then to the second question. They're somewhat intertwined, but the first one right up there is your policy level discussion. So far so good, you're doing a great job.
Pat?
I think a major problem that we're having right now is from all kinds of things that I have reviewed. There is no hard and fast definition for any of this. If you look at all of the different bylaws, they're winging it. If you look at all the different reports that we've got, they come through with different numbers. If it were easy, we'd have it all laid out in front of us as to what we could do. A number that sticks in my head is, well, there should be a 2-kilometer distance, 1.25 miles. All I have to do is imagine, as far as placement for the very large turbines. We don't have that to protect residents, as far as I know. And another problem that we have is that when we're looking at whether we should have these large turbines, we could be talking now with open space, but what is potentially there within that protected zone, whatever it is that we decide upon, could be developed into residences in the future. Because it's zoned to be that way. So that's why I come down so strongly against these large turbines. We're not going to have the same quality of life here if we allow that.
Jim?
Well, I think Brian's very cleverly forcing us to step up and make a decision here. We've all been listening to every side of the argument and try to find ways to be reasonable and talk about it, but I mean, I think what he's saying, based on what we've learned so far, and considering that we can change our mind if we learn something else, we've all said we haven't heard this, we don't know enough, but we've learned an awful lot. We've learned that these things are tough on the neighbors, that they do cause damage to property. We're not sure of everything, but if you read these carefully, now we've had more discussion, it's become even more clear. Flowing into the next one, the two things actually go very well together. He's kind of forcing us to give him some guidance so we can get to the goal we talked about of having a clear bylaw based on what we know now. And I think I've moved a little bit on by just reading this and thinking about it tonight and listening to everybody. I mean, we're all trying to embrace a way to find see if these things can work, but if you think about it based on what we know now, and the size really does matter on this, that these big ones are a problem. I think that's what I've seen, and what I've learned from every hearing I've been to. I don't know, 50, 100 hours of testimony. I mean, between the town meetings, our meetings, the two town-wide hearings, we've heard an awful lot. I haven't missed a second of it. So I think I'd have to say moved a little more firmly in my position in agreeing with these two policies on what we know now.
Well, I would like to remind the board that it's my understanding that the majority of the people who are opposed to the current wind turbines out there that are large, which is what we're talking about here, are in favor of wind energy. And also, you may recall the statement in the study done by the state, the DEP, that, that the study was done under the assumption that wind energy was beneficial to people's health and other aspects of basically health. And the other things are ancillary. But I do not see this town telling the planning board that they don't want any more turbines in this town. I do not see that. I absolutely do not see that. And the fact that we've got a 1 megawatt example sitting in front of us here, it could have been 1.2, it could have been 0.8, it could have been anything. So I take that 1 megawatt item in this question is somewhat arbitrary. It's something that's been pulled out and presented to us. So I feel as though, I'm not finished. I'm not anxious to say that this is absolutely the way I feel about future, and whether or not I envision wind turbines of 1 megawatt or greater in Falmouth anymore. So I'm on the fence here. Brian?
Just so you know, the 1 megawatt was not a spin the wheel and landed on 1 megawatt. It's my understanding that the literature has it as a threshold of for industrial size type wind turbines.
That's not correct.
No.
It's my understanding. It is my understanding at this point. I'll stand corrected, but the number I have here, just so you know, wasn't arbitrary.
Okay, I don't recall that being paramount in all the literature that I read, but I mean.
I'll check with my sources, as you said. Regardless of the number, though, the policy level question, you're doing a great job at discussing, and you can go back and revisit them. But the policy level is an industrial size, whatever you envision that to be.
All right.
Okay?
Okay. All right, I want to take further comment on the first bullet then. None?
Well, just that, I noticed that the model amendment to zoning ordinance bylaw prepared by the Division of Energy Resources says, in the general requirements, special permit granting authority, no wind facility over 60 kilowatts of rated nameplate capacity shall be erected, constructed, or installed, or modified as provided in this section without first obtaining a permit from the special permit granting authority. So I don't know if that's a threshold.
That's a very small, 60 kilowatt.
It's
My
not-
understanding is
Yeah.
relatively small. Disregard the 1 megawatt, I don't want that to form a source of contention. Focus on the word industrial size. Okay? And we'll go back and re-research that for you. But my sense is, based on the conversation you've had now, is that the upper limit, whatever that is something that is very important to you. And at this point in time, based on what you know today and the literature you've read, these industrial sizes need to be truly re-examined. And we'll do that for you. That's fine.
Okay, Jim?
Just on those thoughts, I'm very much in favor of aquaculture and fish, find a way things go. There's no way I would want to have a super-sized 20,000 square foot fish growing plant someplace anywhere in town that was, 60 feet high and 40,000 square feet and 80% lot coverage just because it fits a goal and hires people and makes things happen. And I think that's what I'm keying in on the industrial size, process. That's basically it's not because we don't like it, it's really the size. There's lots of other things I'd like to have in town too, but I just wouldn't put monsters in just because I like it.
Okay. Any more comments? I'm trying to get a feel of how we feel about that first question, and I've calculated that there's 3 people that say, no, we don't want those anywhere in Falmouth. There's 1 yes and there's 1 maybe. Would you like to raise your hands as to how you feel about this, and then we get this down so that we know exactly, and the public knows exactly how we feel about it? Yeah, Ken?
Well, the thing about the first policy is if you look at that and then go into the second policy question, they're kind of, the answer to number 2 is going to clarify the answer to number 1, I feel. I mean, I don't, if we want to move on, I can reiterate and go on and explain why I feel so hard that we should not have the industrial-sized turbines. And it goes into the protective, precautionary principle here, and land use, how we want to protect the property. So, I mean, it's kind of like a policy, but they're combined, and there's reasons for both of those questions. So, rather than re-vote, or I think we should maybe like to go a little bit further with the other one, and then we can always come back to the first one.
All right, I go along with that. We can come back. I mentioned before the meeting that to Brian that I would appreciate a definition or an understanding of the precautionary principle. I am not familiar with that. Maybe, Brian, you could do that for us?
Well, if there's a lack of scientific consensus in the literature, we need more study. Then the burden shifts to the policymakers to do no harm. When in doubt, throw it out, is the simplest version I've heard. It's also known as prudent avoidance. If I'm not sure that how deep this pond is, I'm not going to jump in head first. I don't have enough information to know whether or not this is a good idea or not. If you don't have enough information to know whether or not it's a good idea or not, then don't do it. There's a simple, very simplified way of doing that, but there's more sophisticated definitions out there, but I think that's the simplest template to come up.
All right, thank you. That helps me. I don't know about the rest of it. I'm going to read the second bullet for the benefit of the audience and the TV audience. Based on what we know today, from the literature we've read to past experiences we've learned, does any member of the planning board believe that the precautionary principle, in other words, lack of evidence, or in parentheses, prudent avoidance, believe that that principle applies to the future placement of wind turbines of any size anywhere in Falmouth? In other words, the way I look at that, are you worried about placing any wind turbines in Falmouth without a good feeling that you don't have to worry about precaution? In other words, do you have an adequate amount of scientific evidence so that you would say, yeah, it's okay to put a 50 kilowatt turbine in some area that meets the other criteria?
Yeah,
Doug?
I definitely agree with the statement, certainly. Err on the side of caution. So, if it's just a statement of principle, definitely.
So you would say that you do not have enough scientific evidence to place any wind turbine anywhere in Falmouth?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that,
That's what it says.
I don't think that's what it says.
I do believe, it says,
No.
do you believe that the precautionary principle applies to the future placement of wind turbines of any size anywhere in Falmouth?
It
So
does.
if you're going to apply the precautionary principle, that means that you don't have enough scientific evidence, and you don't want to take a risk, you don't want to take any chances of having some situation occur that is gonna be detrimental to some person or some entity in Falmouth.
Well,
That's the way I read this.
Precautionary-
Am I reading this correctly?
You're on the right track.
Okay. Because you
I'll put you back on.
drafted the question, so that's what I'm interpreting the question. So Doug, I'm going back to you.
I don't agree that means that there's not going to be any wind turbines at all. I don't think it completely excludes wind turbines. It means that we're going to be, wherever we don't have enough information to decide to cite it, we're going to not cite it. Unless we can conclusively say wind turbine X will perform at this sound level and can be measured on this particular scale effectively. I mean, if we have the science to approve it, I'm not going to say that, I don't agree that it excludes all wind turbines. I just agree that it's err on the side of caution when citing them. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, Ken?
I believe precautionary principle means kind of like being conservative in how you're going to do something. It's not necessarily that you don't have enough information. You may have enough to know that you need to be cautious. And that is exactly why those industrial-sized 1 megawatt turbines, I definitely wholeheartedly agree with this. Not every turbine you wouldn't want, but certain ones would definitely need precautionary measures. Now, as a board in policy making, a couple of the things that we need to do as a board with our deciding on policies is, one, most of all, is private property protection. Protect the people that live in homes, and not only homes, but their property that they may not have homes on yet. We need to avoid lawsuits and litigation like we've done, and make understandable bylaws so that everything we're going to do is going to make a permitting process. So if there's a gray area, as a board, we need to take it out. And if it means that, well, the turbine's not going to be there, we need to take that gray area out so that the zoning board of appeals, when they go to do the permit, they go, nope, it says this can't happen, and that's it. And that's why, I believe in the precautionary principle. And if we don't have enough information, then you pull back and make sure it's safe to avoid lawsuits, to protect the people, and so that they can permit or not permit. And that's why I wanted to say part 2 is why I believe we don't need those industrial-sized turbines in the town. Because there is so much land that would be near any of these that doesn't have anything on right now. You know, you're looking for open space. Well, unless the person putting the turbine had that 1 mile all around it, there's no safe place, what I've read and seen, for it to go. So that's why I think there's no reason for the 1 megawatt plus. Or if it turns out that a 900, kilobytes or whatever is the industrial size, whatever the industrial size, big couple 100 feet turbines, I don't think there's a place for it. So.
Yeah, I just want to correct one thing that you said. You mentioned the zoning board of appeals. We haven't determined who's going to issue the special permit yet.
Right.
It could very well be
true.
the planning board.
That is true.
Okay.
That is true. Whoever, and I was trying to put bylaw, whoever permits
Okay.
has to clear.
I don't need to waste time, I pretty much agree with what's already been said.
Pat?
I really like the way Doug stated it. I think that currently, everything I've read has to do with the much larger industrial-sized turbines. And the precautionary principle is to say, no. Everything says, we don't have the space, we don't like the potential effects of it, so no, we're erring on that side. What we don't have information on, however, is other sizes of turbines, and there are quite a few of those. I think we have experience with 10 kilowatts here in town, and that's probably about as small as they get, I think. And so when we're looking at this precautionary principle, we really need to have a whole lot more information on the other sizes before we determine a policy as to what will be allowed and what won't be allowed, so that we don't harm property values, people's health, and that sort of thing. And I think our policy needs to be that we don't want to harm these things overall as a town. We live here. and we don't want to harm our neighbors. So, yeah, I would come down on the side of the precautionary principle when we're formulating this bylaw.
Okay. Well, in some of the reading I've done, I saw that there were, some towns had adopted wind energy conversion units, or however they talked about them, wind energy conversion units, I think that's what, I can't remember exactly the.
Renewable energy credits?
Wind energy conversion, electrical conversion, or something like that. I can't remember the exact acronym, but I remember that the particular bylaw addressed people having wind turbines for an individual home. It addressed regional or homeowners associations coming and saying, we want to do a wind turbine for our homeowners association. They also addressed, for townwide, and for industrial uses, a business in town. They wanted to put one up on their roof or something like that. And so to me, that all makes sense in that it should be available to be considered. Absolutely, do you apply the precautionary principle to that? But I'm saying that I don't want to say no to any possible project that's going to convert wind to electrical energy at any level. I see boats with little windmills charging their batteries all day long while they're sitting out in the harbor. It's a great way to charge a battery. I can see electric vehicles being purchased in this town, and people charging the batteries for their electrical vehicles with their own wind turbine on top of their garage. And so I want to leave it open as much as possible for the potential to be there. But I'm absolutely adamant about the effects of wind turbines on property that is not owned and controlled by the person who installs the wind turbine. So that's the way I feel about it anyway. Maybe we should go back then to the first question as suggested by Ken. Based on what we know today from the literature we've read and the past experiences we've learned, does any member of the planning board envision additional industrial-sized wind turbines anywhere in Falmouth? So why don't I just ask whether or not you envision that, whether you don't envision it, or you're on the fence. So anybody that would envision an industrial-sized wind turbine in Falmouth at this time? Is there anybody that would envision that? No. Are there members who envision that they shouldn't be installed in Falmouth?
Yeah, I mean,
3. Okay, and then if you're on the fence, one way or the other?
I guess I'm sort of on the fence, but again, that's just because I feel like I'm winging it with that statement, but
Okay, I'm on the fence. You're on the fence?
I think I am.
Okay, so we got 3 no's and 2 maybes. And then, based on the second bullet, then based on what we know today from the literature that we've read and learned, does any member of the planning board believe that the precautionary principle applies to the future placement of wind turbines of any size and anywhere in Falmouth? Is there those that would agree that the precautionary principle applies to future wind turbines of any size anywhere in Falmouth? Could you raise your hand? Okay, so that's 5. So we all agree that the precautionary principle should be applied. All right, so that's the questions that the staff has posed to us, and Brian said that he would look into a better or maybe a better, but a possible different definition for industrial size.
I think, don't fixate on that.
Oh, you're
In 45 minutes, you set your policy.
Mhm.
Well done, outstanding. You'll find now that the rest will flow somewhat. You can always go back to your policies when, as time and new information permits. So I think it was well worth it, a very nice discussion on the board. If you want to, we can then continue on with other questions, I think, based on what we just discussed the last 45 minutes.
okay. The next bullet on the agenda is
And you should have this a little bit more fleshed out outline of where we'll be heading here for the mechanics of any kind of zoning bylaw, which,
that's the one entitled Wind Energy Systems,
that's correct.
and it's numbered 1 through 5. Okay, so everybody's had a copy of that and
And what we
had a
really-
chance to look at it.
What I would really like you to focus on really is the, number 2, the applicability, and regards to A, B, and C. We had a cursory discussion about that at the last meeting, but now that you've kind of discounted the larger turbines, I guess under applicability, do you see these as principal land uses on a lot? Or do you see them as accessory now? Accessory means that this building has to be customarily incidental thereto. And it's usually a percentage of the size of the building or a percentage of the use of the land. And right now, the zoning bylaw has it pegged around 30%. Whereas a principal use, as you know, is like a single-family house or an office building or whatever. So I think it would be nice for the board to at least start with that
Tonight?
tonight,
Okay.
unless you're tired and want to go home.
No, we're ready.
My sense is that if you want them to be relatively small, you'll probably want to focus on it as an accessory use. Especially if, in fact, you don't, I'll take a step back. Why don't you focus on that question first, before I go much further?
Well, I think what I'd like to do, Brian, is go through these questions as they are right in front of us. Under applicability, A says, may turbines be the principal land use on a lot? Is anybody, discussion on that? Can you envision a wind turbine being the principal use on the lot, on a lot? In other words, somebody comes to us and says, I got an empty lot and I want to put a turbine on it. You, Pat?
Well, we've already said we don't want the large industrial-sized turbines. If it's the principal use on a lot, that means what you would be opting for is a power plant on a lot. And I don't see that happening. First, we ruled out the very large ones under our policy. And so why would anybody want to have it as the principal use on the lot?
Well, if you own 2 lots and you have a house on one of them and the lot next to you is empty, you want to put a wind turbine on that and run the line over to your house, I can see that happening. Jim?
Well, I think there's a couple things going on there. If you did that, it might be a merger and they become one lot, and then it is no longer a principal, it's a secondary. And I think, just like if you put a septic system or a garage or another structure, that merger happens. And the other thing I think about when we talk about principal, I think if the town wanted to rezone an area and make it set for an industrial use that would allow turbines, I think that's fine. Then it's got to go to a 2/3 vote of the town on rezoning, and that would be okay. You know, if the town really wanted it, and if they wanted to rezone an area that was agriculture and say, you know, this is perfect for wind turbines, let's make it an industrial property, and we allow wind turbines in industrial property with the proper setbacks, and it goes through the 2/3 rezoning bylaw, not called spot zoning, no arguments that it gets approved by the town, then I'd be fine with it.
I wouldn't want to exclude it, just on theory. Could be possible.
Ken?
I think as policymakers, we need to be cut and dry here. I think flat out, it should not be a principal use. Shouldn't be. We don't want industrial. What else is that land gonna be? We're not looking for wind turbines here. We're trying to make a bylaw that can be used for accessory uses, which I am envisioning the bylaw being, I mean, whatever, just like our own industrial ones now, well, the one the towns have, that is not principal use. Even those industrials are accessory use. They're to power that plant. So I think we do not need a principal land use after more review on the issues for wind turbines.
Well, I have to agree with Doug. I don't want to cut it out. I want to leave it open, but I'd say I'm going to ask for a vote on that. How many people would be in favor of the possibility of having wind turbine as a principal use on a lot? In favor of that?
I'm in favor of the option.
And to,
Is that in all zoning? I mean,
it's just on a lot.
on a lot, no matter how it was zoned?
Yeah, right. Okay, there's 2 in favor. Man, I gotta find a place to write this. 2 yes and opposed to that? 3, okay. 3 no, okay. Must turbines be an accessory land use on the lot? Well, I think we just answered that because we voted that you want them only as accessory, okay? Does everybody agree with that? Okay.
Yep.
Specifically define principal accessory land use in reference to turbines and appurtenances. I believe Mr. Curry mentioned that, 30%, generally speaking, 30% or less of the land area or its use. Okay?
But that's reference to structures, and so we have in the bylaw today, just give you a perspective. So let's say, just for the sake of argument now, that the board is looking at accessory land uses. The defining characteristic is that it's customarily incidental thereto. Customarily, an accessory use is customarily incidental to the principal use.
Oh, okay. Incidental to the principal use, right.
Right.
Okay.
So let's just say, for the sake of argument, I have an office building. If I had an office building and I wanted to have a 500-car parking garage next to my 5,000 square foot office building that had 15 employees, that wouldn't be customarily incidental thereto. So my recommendation then, if you're going to have an accessory use of the land with regards to wind energy systems, it has to be proportional to the principal use. If I have a very large steel foundry that generates a lot of power, I guess, then it might be customarily incidental there too, but we don't have too many of those in town, nor do I envision that there'll be that too many in the future. So we're probably looking at crafting something for you along those lines. It has to be customarily incidental to the use of the land. If I'm growing, you know, I'm an agricultural pursuit, I'm a cranberry bog, and I need to generate power from my pumps, that's something the board is looking at as an accessory. Does that sound something as though the board is the path you're heading down? If not, it's okay to say no. If it is, then say no.
Doug?
Again, we're going to come back with a draft here that's going to go through another iteration. We're setting the foundation.
So to clarify then, if we're saying that it should be 30% or less of what the principal structure is that what we're saying?
All right, and that is right now how we define accessory structures and uses in the zoning bylaw today. We don't have a good, the power system is going to be 30% of the size of your building doesn't make a lot of sense.
And the footprint also doesn't make a lot of sense because they have a relatively small footprint.
Right, so my guidance to the board is that if you're going to have an accessory use of the land, it's typically customarily incidental thereto the principal use. So at this point, we're probably going to craft this along the lines of you use what you generate. If you need 10 kilowatts, don't generate 500. Now you're no longer customarily incidental, like my example with the parking garage. It should be proportional to the use of your property at this point, is probably the guidance I give you at this point. If it makes sense, we'll craft it up that way, at least as a starting point. It might be that you say, okay, in certain districts, you can have, you can generate a little bit more for whatever purposes compel you. But at this point, I'm looking at customarily incidental and proportional to the use of the land.
Jim?
A question comes to mind when I think about this. Let's say your primary use is a giant solar array, and you have a big field, and your primary use is now collecting solar energy. Would now then, being an accessory use, as long as it wasn't 30% of the power, could a wind turbine fit in there, or other some kind of mechanical things? Is it possible that could go that way? Because I think in the future, there are gonna have to be combined ways to put some of these things together to generate power. And if we had a piece of land that was, its primary use was to generate power from a solar array, and my God, a wind tower could double its power but fit in there, then it would be the same use as the primary use.
But Jim, we just voted to say
No, but
that wind turbines.
No, but I'm thinking of a situation where you're having, it's a power plant generation area. I mean, that's the only,
It's theoretically possible, but that's,
it's not here yet, but
Not here.
I'm thinking that could come in the future. I've heard talk of designs of combining technologies with solar arrays, wind turbines, mechanicals.
then it might be then down the road, as those types of land uses emerge. Remember, we allow them in light industrial C zones, these photovoltaic arrays.
Right.
You can revisit that question, whether or not you want to have these types of energy systems as principal uses of the land. That way you could have a combination of systems as a principal use. But right now, we're kind of focusing on...
It's not here yet, yeah, I got you.
We're not there yet. We're kind of focusing on a wind energy system that's accessory to a principal use. The principal uses are allowed in the community today.
Yeah.
What we're dealing with in Falmouth and elsewhere, unless it is a wind farm whose principal use is to produce energy. In Falmouth in particular, the turbines that we have produce energy for the site on which they're placed. And we go all the way from 100% usage with wherever it's been placed, I would assume, from the smaller ones, up to, I think, web engineering uses 5% of the power they produce. So I think what we're looking at right here is, if an application comes before us, how much power do you use? And then we have to look at a percentage that we want to allow. And if we say 100% will be used on site that you're producing, that limits the size of the turbine right there that can be put on that piece of property. If we say 75% has to be used on site, well, something like that may make more sense because businesses grow, they change, they may need more or less power. But when we give the original parameters, we may want to look at the majority of the power being used on the site, and we may want to add a little bit onto that. I'm not even saying right now whether it should be 30% or 50% or 10% or whatever, but some kind of potential for increasing the power generation to meet the needs of the building that the wind turbine services. So that is, we're looking at a different way of defining accessory when we're looking at power generation than we have traditionally looked at, I think, as a board.
Ken?
Well, on what Pat was saying, I was thinking when we were discussing, I had a greater than 50% on-site I thought should be used. So that way it's not people trying to just develop something and put a big turbine in there. We're trying to protect everything. We don't want the industrial size going. So if somebody wants wind energy, and I'm not against wind energy, but I think if they're gonna put it on a property, they should be using it, not trying to make a profit off of the energy.
And sell it into the grid.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the majority of it anyway. Some of it's fine.
I really fundamentally disagree with that. I think that if it fits the site and it meets the setbacks and it's not disturbing people, especially if it's in the industrial park, why would we want to limit the capacity? We want to produce as much as possible. Why set arbitrary limits? If it fits and if it's not disturbing anyone, let it produce as much as possible.
But then you're getting outside the definition of accessory.
Well, that's why we're talking about the definition of accessory now.
Right.
I mean, I don't agree with the principle of diminishing the resource with the bylaw.
Okay, let me see, how are we gonna handle that? We're still dealing with then, the definition of accessory,
Well,
really.
it's okay, Ralph, you discussed it today. What we'll do, based on the notes and the discussions that you had up till now, we'll come back with some alternatives for you. And you can further discuss how far you want to go in definitions of accessory, which gets into those other questions of, are they allowed town-wide or just specific districts?
Okay,
Doug is getting into specificity with regards to certain districts. What might be accessory in a residential B district
Right.
may not coincide with what might be accessory in an industrial B district.
okay,
You would like to disaggregate that.
okay.
Okay.
All right, then let's go on to the next question. Are turbines allowed town-wide? Ken?
I'll comment and say no. I think there's certainly, I don't want to see them in residential neighborhoods.
Okay. I have one comment.
No, I'll comment
Pat?
too. I think when you're dealing with residential neighborhoods, I don't like to see them in residential neighborhoods of smaller lot sizes. It may be that some of the smaller turbines are appropriate for, say, 80,000 square foot zoning. The 10 kilowatt. We haven't had complaints about those. And some of them are right near neighbors. So I think that we have to look at the sizes of the lots that are in the various zoning districts with the potential usage of those sized lots.
Jim?
I look at what we already have in residential as far as height restrictions, impact on neighbors, nuisance, and follow those guidelines. If someone can place one and fit all those, I know we have building heights of 35 feet as their in a residential neighborhood, is there a tower height of like 50 feet? Isn't there something like that for a radio tower?
Radio tower.
So,
I mean, I could see if
They're not a building, that's the thing that worries me. They are not a building.
right.
So,
one,
I could
would
see a
have-
smaller turbine that didn't impact the neighbors, didn't have any of the problems that we're gonna be discussing, fitting on a large residential piece of property, might work. I don't wanna rule it, that's, it would have to fit.
Doug?
And there's different size residential areas also. I mean, the larger ones, there's a potential. And some of those larger ones are in the Woods Hole and in the wind resource area.
I would just like to remind you of the point I mentioned earlier, that if a person buys an automobile that's run electrically and they want to charge it, and with a small turbine on the top of their garage, I don't have an issue with that as long as it doesn't bother their neighbors. So personally, I think they should be allowed town-wide, but it depends on, how appropriate they are to where they're putting them. It's site-specific. Ken?
well, like you said, put it on a garage and it doesn't bother the neighbors. That's what we have to make a determination as to will it be allowed or not allowed, because whether I live in a neighborhood of 120 people, I don't want to see 50 turbines on half of my neighbors because they say it doesn't bother them, but as I drive down the street, my property value, I would believe, has gone down because it's an eyesore driving down the street with 50 turbines on because people have, turbines put in. So that's why I think we need to say specifically where and where it shouldn't be, and I think it should not be everywhere in town.
Okay, I'm gonna take a vote on that, then. Are turbines allowed town-wide, yes or no? Yes. If you believe yes, raise your hand. Okay. 3 yes. No. 2 no. Our next question, are turbines allowed in certain are turbines only allowed in certain zoning districts? Well, we've just answered that question, because we've said
No, you
that,
haven't. You kind of said the opposite.
that's what I'm saying. We're saying that are turbines only allowed in certain zoning districts?
No,
And the
if you
answer
ask
to
that
that is no.
question-
Because
you ask
they're
that
allowed,
question, Ralph-
they're allowed townwide. We just voted that.
No, if you
Maybe-
ask that question, I would say yes. I believe they should be allowed on certain districts. You kind of got to read all of them.
Maybe we should take a
I
pass
know,
through
I'm
it.
gonna vote no in that case. I'm gonna vote, if you want me, if you wanna do, if you
Well,
wanna,
you're saying that they're mutually exclusive, I mean, that's.
yes, they are.
That's,
I believe they are. Are turbines
But I
only
believe
allowed in
turbines
certain
are-
zoning districts? If you say yes to that, then you're saying that they're not allowed townwide.
I know, I agree with you, because when I voted yes, I was saying that a small turbine, I couldn't outlaw it, you know what I mean? So you didn't say turbines of any size, so a small turbine could be allowed. I could, just like you see on somebody's boat, a really small turbine, they could have a little teeny one in their backyard. It could be 10 feet high and not bother anybody. And so that's why I answered yes to that question, because there was no size restriction on it.
These questions, like Doug was saying, it's kind of not a question. You kind of not, we should probably read all of them and then have a discussion about all of them, and then you'll come up with an answer as to best fits, not,
I agree, voting them one at a time, we're
Yeah.
kind of, it's gonna take a
shooting
long
ourselves in the
time.
foot, yeah.
I don't see the inconsistency
it's a
there at all. I
bigger-
think
it's a
those are
bigger discussion,
obviously,
though.
those are obviously mutually exclusive.
Well,
It's a
so you
discussion.
get bogged down. Just go on to then, and try to look at these paragraph by paragraph. Just go on then to the next sentence, and we'll try to refine these a little bit better for you. Don't get hung up on, is it mutually exclusive or not, but, let's just go on to the next one. What my sense is, I'm hearing from the board is that, the smaller the turbine,
The more areas it could go in.
The more areas it can go into. It's a function of lot size and district.
Well, we're about at the end of the questions here. The next question is, are small turbines allowed in more zoning districts where larger turbines are not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't see anybody arguing that question.
Yes.
All right, so,
These could have been put in a different order, it might have worked a little better.
You know, the other thing
Well-
we're dealing with here.
It's not a test.
I blame myself.
The other thing we're dealing with here is part of the question is what Bob pointed out, that it's well known that turbines have to be of a particular height to be useful. That a lot of the times when they do not function correctly, it's like you're talking about, you put it on the garage. Well, it's not gonna catch the wind very often, because there are blockages of wind, and so they're gonna wanna put it on a tower that if I'm recalling right, it has to be at least 70 feet tall to catch the wind appropriately. We may not want to see this all over the place either. If you have, say, 20,000 square foot lots, well, my goodness, are you going to want to see 70-foot turbine towers on every lot? It's a question that we really have to think about.
I agree, but I guess the reason I'm being, too lenient right now is because I don't know what's gonna come up. And I really believe that 99% of them are gonna get shot down through the process. But I guess I'm just holding out hope that maybe there's some places that these things can fit. So I don't know if that's good or bad planning, but that's my thinking.
okay. Yeah, Jim?
Well, I think, what this makes it an absolute, but I think you gotta take it in consideration that we look at under the special permit process, and does it affect views and vistas? Does it degrade the neighborhood? All the same judgments that we use for making those decisions for other uses should be applied to them, and if it can pass all those same tests, I think it could fit, but then it has to go through that special permit process. This is like trying to do it a by right thing, and I don't think it should be a by right. I think it should be a special permit, and it should be handled in the same way we handle everything else, and it doesn't severely. I would not want to have a beautiful home with a beautiful view, have 10 neighbors in front of me, and have them all pop up 50-foot turbines in front of my house, and totally destroy my value, because I would say that affects my views and vista. And I think that's what our job is, to prevent that from happening. So I think the special, we're taking this a little out of context. I think you need to apply this to the special permit process and think about it in that aspect and the protections that are there. And then I'm a lot more comfortable with applying some of these things, but just applying them outright, it's difficult, because I just, anyways, that's enough.
Well, that just segues into the next question, and I think I can answer this question, obvious. Are turbines of by right land use or by special permit land use? I'm gonna say all those in favor of a special permit.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, and the next,
And it's all iterative, they go back and forth, because once you answer the special permit question, you move back to the district question. So don't, try to be more global and.
Don't get caught up.
Don't get caught up in looking at it word by word or sentence by sentence. Try to be a little more clear. That's all. You're doing a great job, John.
You say that to all your planning boards.
that takes care of the third bullet for tonight, and covers the applicability under the draft, and I would like everybody to write the word draft at the top of their wind energy systems handout. I mean, the handout per se is not a draft, but the criteria as you get along farther in through it is somewhat in draft form. I mean, we don't have to follow this particular thing. It has been developed by the staff, and we're probably going to be following it reasonably closely as we go forward, but we may have some changes that we want to put in there. Brian, you got anything else?
Yeah, so I'm really looking at, you've defined your policies for us, that was terrific. You've defined that you're heading in an accessory direction, you're heading in a special permit land use, and you want us to kind of fit that to a function of lot sizes and district. I think we've got enough to get you probably don't worry about definitions and stuff like that, we'll plug that in for you. Try to focus then on your next section for our discussion next week, because remember under chapter 40A, it sets a floor of protection, because the minimum you must provide in terms of public participation in the process. You can require more. So think about that as a requirement of this zoning district, and what you may want to compel in terms of enfranchising abutters and franchising stakeholders. For your next conversation, not tonight.
Wow.
Okay?
So you're
Very,
talking,
very important. Public participation is your next really.
so in other words, do you want to have hearings for the development of this rather than hearings for a special permit?
No, it's a special permit. It'll be section 9 of 48. Section 9, section 11 of 48 sets a floor. You must go out to abutters.
Okay.
Abutters and abutters to abutters within 300 feet. That doesn't mean 300-foot abutters. If I have a 100-foot lot and a 100-foot lot, you go out 2 lots. It's the abutter and the abutter to the abutter.
Mhm.
So now, when we come to this type of a land use, even though it's accessory at this point, think hard about the public participation end of it, and where we're heading with some of that. That's your next real public policy decisions here. The rest is somewhat mechanical.
Okay.
Okay?
And then we're meeting next week, and and we will discuss this then?
See, your schedule, I'm told,
Because I know next week is school vacation.
Is-
Oh, that's school
Vacation week.
vacation, that's right.
So-
we're
No,
not meeting next week,
There's
we're
not.
meeting the 24th, and you will be meeting the 8th.
Next meeting, wait a
That's
minute,
the election.
next meeting,
This is the 24th, April 24th, and May 8th.
4/24 and 5/8,
5/8, 5/15 is the election.
okay.
Can't be an election.
All right, so at 4/24, do you want us to be, you want us to discuss that
Oh,
this
yeah, I'd like
portion?
to, we'll be developing this, and you're gonna have a much more expanded draft. But some of the policy questions you need to be focused on are the public participation.
Yeah, okay,
That's a real policy level of discussion. The rest, some of it is more mechanical, the definitions and whatnot.
okay,
Okay?
yep.
And
Now-
we'll have that out to you a week before, we'll have that out at the end of next week.
Okay, just hang on a second, one, Jim. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the way Brian summarized his take on our discussion tonight? Did he get it the way you feel it's right? Yeah, Jim?
Yes, I believe he did, and I believe it's important to take it the way he said it, because it was in general, and not pick apart these little votes we had, and someone said this and someone said that. I really agree with the way he summarized it, and that's the thought we were having a discussion on, and thinking where our thoughts on, and not picked apart by they voted this way, they voted that way, because we were trying to develop a consensus of opinion and direction to go.
You took a straw poll,
Right.
no motion. So there's essentially no vote of the board, but it just gives an overall guidance picture for us.
I didn't want to be misconstrued that we voted a certain way. It was a discussion on opinion.
Got it?
All right. I guess that what we discussed tonight will be communicated to our 2 missing members through the minutes. And so they will understand how we discussed and what we voted and so forth.
They can read the minutes. Remember, the minutes are not transcripts. There are no motions, but they can get a sense of what it was. They can watch this stream on TV and whatnot.
Okay.
They don't always rely on minutes.
All right, yeah, okay, all right. And conversations. All right, now let me see here. We have, the next item on the agenda is correspondence. We have some correspondence from an attorney.
He represents a property owner on Sandpoint Shores. And they're looking for a release of a planning board covenant. Covenant's from 1975. As you know, they're only enforceable for 20 years. But it appears as though this lot never got released, and the attorney for the mortgagee bank would like the board's vote to release this lot. All the lots around it are built on. Sandpoint Shores is a paved road. They're going to close on Tuesday. I can
No
recommend,
sense of urgency there.
no sense of urgency there, but I can recommend to the board that this old road covenant be released. The road is built.
Okay. All right,
It's
so,
clear, though, this is like it's like a negative covenant. It's dead after, if they took us to court, they would get it. 20 years, it's over.
Well, a very nervous bank attorney would.
Right.
But it's on the title.
Right, it's gotta go away, but
Right.
it really has no standing if they wanted to challenge us.
We couldn't enforce it,
Right.
but for the purposes of the mortgagee bank.
Right, we gotta make it go away.
They won't get the loan.
Right.
We can vote to release the covenant for lot 158, Sandpoint Shores Drive.
158 on this
Lot
lot.
158.
Lot 158.
I move.
All right, well, just, let me read the article, let me read the letter, please. It's to the planning board. Subject is a covenant release request. Dear members of the planning board, please accept this letter as a formal request for the release from covenant regarding the following property. Lot 158, Sandpoint Shores, East Falmouth, current owner Richard Nugent. Covenant description, as set forth at book 1480, page 1186 in the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. See attached. And this is the attachment, and Brian has provided that for us. So the mechanics of this, Brian, is that you draft a letter to them telling them how we voted. Is that correct?
No, you're authorizing me to sign on your behalf for recordation of the Registry of Deeds, a release of that covenant.
So it's not a letter, you have to sign a,
It's an actual form that's notarized, my signature is notarized, and I am, on your behalf, signing this release of covenant, and it gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
okay. All right, so now everybody understands. All right, so then I need a motion, and the motion would be
To release the covenant
on this property.
on
of
this
of
property, and I'll fill in the blanks, the date,
Okay.
the recordation
Okay.
information.
All right, so I need a motion to
I
that effect.
move that we release the covenant on lot 158, Sandpoint Shore Drive.
Second,
I'll second.
Jim, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, the motion carries. That is the end of the agenda. So, we know when we're meeting next?
And there'll be some site visits, because you have some regulatory work coming your way on those agendas. There's some site plans and special permits and definitive plans.
And we're also looking to a site visit for the existing wind turbines in town.
We didn't get much of a response from the board members, so we're gonna try again for the 24th.
Oh, on the 24th, so that would be like at 5 in the afternoon or something?
Correct.
Question?
Okay, Jim?
I visited them all, I've spent a couple hours walking around, is it important? I said I wouldn't come because I've already seen it, but if you think we need to be there, I'll gladly show up.
It's for everyone who wants to go. If no one wants to go.
It's not
then
mandatory.
Not
No,
mandatory.
no, but I'm just saying what's new. I mean, I have been to every wind turbine, the town turbines, I've
All right, then
walked the
that's,
circumference of both of them.
all right, so.
Have you seen the smaller wind turbines? in
I've seen
town?
the smaller wind turbines, well, I've been to Webb, I've been to the two wind turbines on the way to Woods Hole, so that's
And the
five
high,
I've seen.
the high school's the only other one.
And I've been to the high school.
Yeah.
6, I've seen 6.
Okay. Doug?
I'd like to know if we can visit them while they're running, because it's intermittent now. And I visited the sites already, but I haven't visited the neighborhoods affected. I mean, some of them I have, but not all the areas on the maps. And I'd just like to know, maybe we could somehow get a schedule of times when they'll be on, so we can do those site visits?
Let me work on that for you. That's fine.
Put together a good schedule, I'll come, I've actually been to the neighborhoods, driven to all the houses, and done it, but if it would be helpful for us to all do it, I'll make a point of coming again.
I don't mind doing it alone, but I just don't want to,
We'll need to send a memo to Mother Nature asking her to provide adequate wind so that they
Well,
will.
it may not be necessary as a group to visit these places, but if in fact you want to visit, the one in Kingston's, or wherever you want to go, we'll set that up for you. But right now, it seems as though there's not much of an interest as a group, but maybe some individual board members like to go out and take a tour. That's fine.
So you'll email us again asking us?
Yes, I'll get some emails.
Okay, and we would be leaving on the 24th of this month.
Correct.
Okay.
The only thing, I don't want to say that we have a lack of interest, I have plenty of interest, I've already visited with this point.
Correct. Conservation of energy stuff.
Right.
I believe Jim also wants to place a committee report, and we might include reports from all of our, people that represent, like myself on the Community Preservation Committee, and an update on the local comprehensive plan, and whatever other health things that we have. We have someone.
But just committee reports. And all
Committee
that.
reports, yeah, okay. All right? Okay, and a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.